The orbital station hung above the dying world like a ghost. The planet below had once been important to the Valdris Empire, a center of trade and culture. Now it was burning. Fires raged across its surface, visible even from the station's windows. 3 separate fleets blockaded the planet. None of them answered to the same command anymore. Ambassador Victoria stood at the observation window and watched the destruction. She had lived for 273 years and had never seen the Empire fail so completely. The Valdris had dominated this region of space for over 10,000 years. Their power had seemed absolute, eternal. Now it was coming apart in months. The doors to the council chamber opened behind her. Victoria turned away from the window and walked into the room. The other council members were already there, arguing as they had been arguing for weeks. Their voices filled the space with anger and confusion. Supreme Elder Cash sat at the head of the long table. He was the oldest of them all, older than Victoria by almost a century. His skin had turned pale with age, and his eyes moved slowly across the faces of the people speaking. He did not interrupt. He waited. Governor Lucas was speaking now, his voice loud and sharp. He represented the Eastern Territories, the parts of the empire that were crumbling fastest. He wanted action. He wanted the council to authorize something, anything, that might stop the collapse. "We have resources they do not have," Lucas said. He stood up from his chair and pointed at the display showing the battle positions. "We can hire mercenaries from the outer worlds. We can buy weapons from the trader fleets. We can rebuild a military force strong enough to push back the insurgents." Commander Patricia shook her head. She was a soldier, not a politician, but the council had pulled her into their meetings because they needed someone who understood warfare. "There's not enough money or time," Patricia said. "The outer worlds will not sell to us. They smell weakness. They want to see us fall so they can take our territories." An older council member named David spoke next. "We should surrender some regions. Negotiate with the insurgents. Give them land and keep what we can defend." "That is cowardice," another voice said. This was Councillor Reeves. He represented the human delegation from Earth. He was younger than the others, maybe only 50 years old. His species had only recently been brought into direct contact with the wider galaxy. Humans were still learning how to exist in this larger world. Reeves was here to observe, not to decide. But he had opinions. Victoria listened to the voices bounce around the room. She had heard these arguments before. There was no good solution. That was the real problem. The council wanted to find a solution, but none existed. Supreme Elder Cash finally raised his hand. The room became quiet. When Cash spoke, people listened. "I have been thinking about something," Cash said slowly. "Something that some of you may have considered, but did not speak of aloud." Victoria felt something cold move down her spine. She knew what Cash was thinking about. She had thought about it too. "We could contact humanity," Cash said. He let the words hang in the air. "They have soldiers. They have weapons. We have treated them as a secondary species, kept them away from the main power structures of the galaxy. But they are strong. They are unified. They could help us." The reaction was immediate. Voices rose in panic and anger. Several council members stood up from their seats. "Absolutely not," David said. "The ancient accords forbid direct military contact with isolated species." "The accords are paper," Lucas said. "The Empire is dying. Paper does not matter when everything is falling apart." Reeves was watching Cash carefully. The human had intelligence in his eyes. He was not speaking now, but Victoria could see he was thinking, calculating. Cash held up his hand again. Silence returned. "I need to tell you all something," Cash said. "Something that is in the oldest records, from before we had written laws and formal accords. something that was spoken by mouth from generation to generation in the time of my ancestors. Victoria knew what was coming. She had read those same records. She had hoped they would never need to speak of them aloud. Humanity must not be awakened, Cash said. His voice was firm and strong, not the voice of an old man. Not now. Not in our time of weakness. This was the warning given to my ancestors by the first explorers who went to Earth. Humanity is something other. They are different from us in ways that matter. Different how? Lucas demanded. They are soft. They are young. They live on a world with weak gravity and thick air. They have not even left their own system without our help. They are soft, Cash agreed. Their bodies break easily. But their will does not break. I have read the records of the first contact teams. They describe humans as dangerous, not in the way other species are dangerous. Dangerous in their refusal to accept what is impossible. Victoria stepped forward. I have read those records too, she said. The teams called humans unpredictable. They described soldiers who would continue fighting even when surrender was clearly the logical choice. They described civilians who would protect strangers at great cost to themselves. They called this illogical and strange. Reeves finally spoke. You fear us, he said simply. It was not a question. We fear what we do not understand, Cash said. And we fear what your people might do if they ever truly committed to a goal. The records warned that humanity's strength does not come from superior weapons or longer lives or advanced knowledge. It comes from something inside them, a kind of commitment that seems almost impossible. You should have let us develop naturally, Reeves said. His voice was quiet. Kept that secret instead of using it to control us. We kept you isolated for your safety, Cash said. And for ours. An empire built on hierarchy and control, built on efficiency and power, cannot survive contact with a species that is willing to throw away efficiency for the sake of protecting those they love. It is a kind of infection, a way of thinking that spreads. The council was silent. Outside the window, another explosion lit up the surface of the dying planet. I call for a vote, Cash said. All in favor of maintaining the quarantine on humanity, with no military contact, no desperate calls for aid, no breaking of the ancient accords. Raise your hand. Victoria raised her hand immediately. 4 others followed. Lucas did not raise his hand. Neither did David. Patricia looked torn, but she did not raise her hand either. The vote was 5 for maintaining the quarantine, 4 against. The motion passed. It is done, Cash said. We will find another way. We will not break the accords. But as the council members filed out of the room, Victoria saw the look in Lucas's eyes. It was the look of a man who had made a decision. He would find another way. He would contact the humans, accords or not. The vote had not stopped anything. It had only delayed the inevitable. Cash called Victoria to him as she was leaving. He took her hand and held it firmly. He will try, Cash said. Lucas or someone else will try to contact them. Yes, Victoria said. You must prepare yourself, Cash said. Because when that happens, everything changes. The age of the Valdris Empire will end. I do not know if what comes after will be better or worse. But it will be different. Victoria nodded. She looked at the old man's face and saw something she had not seen before. She saw fear. Not fear of failure or fear of death. Fear of something larger. Fear of a future that would not be controlled. The capital world was changing. Governor Lucas could see it in the way people moved through the streets. They were afraid. They were moving faster. They were hoarding food and fuel. The city that had once been the heart of the empire was becoming a place of survival. Lucas stood in his office tower and looked down at the crowded streets below. This was his responsibility now. The council had voted to maintain the quarantine, but they had also sent him here to keep the Eastern Territories from falling completely. It was an impossible task, like asking someone to hold back a flood with their bare hands. His communication device buzzed. It was Commander Patricia. She wanted to meet. She had information about the supply situation. Lucas told her to come to his private office. He did not want other officials present. What he needed to discuss could not be heard by too many people. Patricia arrived 30 minutes later. She looked tired. Her military uniform was dirty from the work of organizing refugee movements and security operations. She sat down heavily in the chair across from Lucas. "We have 2 months of supplies left for the population," Patricia said. "After that, there will be hunger. Hunger makes people desperate. Desperate people join the insurgent factions. The cycle continues until we cannot control anything." Lucas nodded. He had known this. The math was simple. Without supply shipments from the other territories, the capital world would starve. The other territories were not sending supplies because they were busy fighting each other. "I have a plan," Lucas said, "but it requires you to trust me completely. It requires you to make a choice that might be considered a violation of council orders." Patricia's eyes narrowed. She was a soldier. She understood what Lucas was saying. She understood the weight of what he was about to propose. "Tell me," she said. "I am going to contact humanity," Lucas said. It was better to say it directly, without hiding. Not officially. Not through the council. I am going to send them a message through hidden channels. I am going to tell them that we need help. Not military conquest. Not imperial support. Help with stabilization. With preventing total collapse. Patricia stood up from her chair. She walked to the window and looked down at the city. She did not speak for a long time. "You know what Cash said," Patricia said finally. "You heard the warning." "I heard it," Lucas said. "I think it was wrong. I think Cash is an old man holding on to old fears. The Accords were meant to keep humanity isolated and manageable. They were not meant to protect us. They were meant to protect the Empire's power." Patricia turned around. She looked at Lucas directly. "If you do this, the Empire is finished," Patricia said. "Not today, not next month, but finished. Humanity will come here. They will see what we have done. They will see the truth about how we operate. And they will change things. They will change us." "The Empire is already finished," Lucas said. His voice was hard. "I am trying to save something from the wreckage. People, culture, knowledge. If we wait for the Council to solve this through normal means, there will be nothing left to save." Patricia sat back down. She put her head in her hands for a moment. When she looked up again, her face was set. "Do it," she said. "But do it carefully. If the Council finds out before you have contact with humanity, they will imprison you. They will suppress the messages. The Accords are important to them, more important than survival." "I know," Lucas said. "That is why I am telling you. Because I need someone I trust to know the truth. If something happens to me, if they arrest me before the message gets through, you can complete the job." Patricia nodded slowly. She understood what she was agreeing to. She was committing to betrayal of the Council, betrayal of the Empire, in the hope that salvation might come from an unexpected direction. Lucas spent the next 4 days preparing the message. He used old communication systems, ones that predated the modern network. He encoded the information in ways that would be difficult for the Council's monitoring systems to detect. He told the humans the truth. The Empire was collapsing, regions were desperate, and one governor was willing to offer hospitality and resources in exchange for limited military support and advice. He did not ask for conquest. He did not ask for domination. He asked for help. The message was sent through a hidden relay station located 3 light years from the capital world. It would take time to reach Earth. Time for response to travel back. But once it was sent, it could not be unheard. Patricia came to see Lucas after the message was transmitted. She brought news that was both good and bad. The good news was that the council was still occupied with political arguments. They had not discovered the message. The bad news was that something else was happening. Captain Marcus, one of the Empire's most respected military commanders, had made a decision. He was gathering ships. He was declaring his own faction. He was choosing to abandon the council and fight for himself. Marcus is talking about offering support to the Eastern Territories, Patricia said. But only if we pledge loyalty to him. He wants to become a regional power. He does not want to support the Empire. Lucas felt something shift inside him. Events were moving faster than he had expected. The Empire was breaking into pieces, even as he tried to contact the humans. Does Marcus know about my message? Lucas asked. Not yet, Patricia said. But he will find out soon. Information moves through military channels. Once he knows that you have violated the Accords, he will use it against you. He will tell the council. Let him, Lucas said. By the time he tells them, the humans will have received the message. The chain of events will have started. It cannot be stopped. Patricia looked at him with something like respect. You have gambled everything, she said. Yes, Lucas said. But the alternative was watching everything die slowly. At least this way we tried. Outside the office, the city continued its work. People went to their jobs. They cared for their families. They did not know that their world was about to change. They did not know that a forbidden contact had been made. They did not know that the ancient warnings were about to be tested in the real world. High above the atmosphere, a supply convoy was being escorted back to the planet by Marcus's fleet. In a few days, a different convoy would arrive. And a few days after that, another. Marcus's faction was securing resources and power. Lucas's plan was setting events in motion. And somewhere far away, on a planet called Earth, humans were about to receive a message that would change their history forever. General Derek received the message at 3 in the morning. A military courier woke him from sleep and brought him to the Secure Communications Center. Derek was the head of strategic military planning for all of Earth. He had not expected to be called to the center in the middle of the night. Nothing good ever came from urgent communications. The message was locked inside the most secure system Earth had. Derek read it twice. Then he read it again. It was coded in a format that the Valdris had taught to human military officials, just in case. The message was from someone named Governor Lucas. It asked for military help. It stated that the Valdris Empire was falling apart. Derek did not wait. He called President Harold directly. Harold was the leader of Earth, and this decision was too large for anyone else to make. They met in the Situation Room within an hour. Dr. Lisa was there too. She was a specialist in xenanthropology, the study of alien cultures and biology. If Earth was going to make a decision about contacting the Valdris directly, they needed to understand what they were dealing with. It could be a trap, Derek said. He spread out the translated message on the table. The Valdris have been isolated from us for decades. They have always controlled the information flow. Why would they suddenly ask for help? Because they are losing, Dr. Lisa said. She was reading the message carefully. Look at the level of detail in this communication. Lucas describes specific military positions, specific supply shortages, specific political divisions. This is not propaganda. This is intelligence from someone who is desperate enough to break protocol. What about the ancient Accords? Harold asked. He was thinking about the political implications. If Earth broke the quarantine first, other powers in the galaxy would view it as an act of expansion. They would see Earth as trying to take advantage of the Valdris collapse. The Accords are a tool of the Valdris, Dr. Lisa said. Her voice was firm. They were designed to keep younger species in line. They were never meant to protect us. They were meant to protect the Valdris from competition. Derek was thinking about military advantage. If Earth sent ships to help stabilize the Valdris territories, they would gain access to resources and knowledge that had been denied to them for decades. They would gain all eyes in a region that had been close to human influence. But they would also be taking a risk. If something went wrong, if the Valdris discovered that Earth had violated the quarantine, there could be war. What do we know about the military strength of the Valdris now? Harold asked. Derek pulled up a file. 3 months ago, their overall military strength was estimated at 200,000 warships. Now, based on the intelligence Lucas sent, we estimate it has been reduced by about 40%. Most of their losses are from internal conflict. They are fighting each other more than fighting external enemies. How many ships do we have? Harold asked. We could send 3,000, Derek said. Maybe 4,000 if we empty the home defense fleets. But we would need time to build more. Earth cannot afford to be without protection. The message asks for military advisors and limited support, Dr. Lisa said. Not a full invasion force. Maybe they want help organizing what they have left, not adding more numbers. Harold stood and walked to the window. Outside, Earth was asleep. The cities were dark. Billions of people were resting, unaware that their government was discussing whether to end decades of isolation. What happens if we do nothing? Harold asked. Derek answered. The Valdris Empire collapses completely. Various factions take control of different territories. The region becomes unstable. Eventually, that instability spreads. Maybe not to Earth directly, but to our allies and neighbors. Eventually, it becomes our problem anyway. And if we intervene? Harold asked. We prove that we can operate effectively beyond our own world, Derek said. We show that we are a serious power. We gain knowledge, resources, and relationships. But we also prove the ancient warnings right. We prove that humans cannot be controlled with isolation. We prove that we are different from other species. Different how? Harold asked. He was looking at Derek directly. Derek thought about the reports Dr. Lisa had given him years ago. She had studied alien cultures, their ways of thinking and behaving. She had compared them to human culture. Humans make choices that seem inefficient to other species, Derek said. We protect people we do not know. We value individual lives, even when it costs resources. We cooperate with competitors to achieve goals that benefit everyone. Most other species view this as illogical. The Valdris specifically tried to suppress this in us because they thought it made us weak. It does not make us weak, Dr. Lisa said. It makes us dangerous to empires built on hierarchy and control. If we come to the Valdris and help them in ways that are expensive and difficult, we will change their culture. We will show them a different way of operating. That is what Cash was afraid of. Not that we would conquer them, that we would change them. Harold was quiet for a long time. Then he made a decision. We send a delegation, he said. Military advisors, diplomatic staff, and a security force. We do not send a war fleet. We do not try to conquer or control. We help them stabilize, and we learn what we can about their technology and their politics. And we do this carefully, with rules of engagement that protect us if things go wrong. Derek nodded. It will take time to assemble and prepare the delegation. At least 3 weeks. We have 3 weeks, Harold said. The Valdris are not going anywhere. Their empire will still be falling in 3 weeks. Within hours, Derek was organizing the delegation. He would go himself as military advisor. Admiral Thomas would command the fleet. Dr. Lisa would be the diplomatic liaison. They would bring scientists, engineers, and soldiers. They would bring the best of what Earth had to offer. As Derek worked through the details, he could not shake a feeling that Dr. Lisa had mentioned. This was the moment that changed everything. Humanity was stepping out of isolation. For the first time, humans were choosing to act on the galactic stage as a unified force. Somewhere in the Valdris Empire, Governor Lucas received the acknowledgement of his message. It had taken 3 weeks for the signal to travel and return. The response was simple. We are coming. Help is on the way. Prepare a landing zone. Lucas showed the message to Patricia. She read it and looked at him with an expression that was half wonder and half terror. What have we done? She said. We have opened a door, Lucas said. And the Valdris will never be the same again. The human fleet arrived during a time of intense fighting. 3 major Valdris factions were engaged in combat around the capital world. Orbital bombardments were ongoing. Entire districts of the capital city were burning. General Derek watched the destruction from the observation window of the human command ship. He had seen war before. Earth had experienced plenty of conflict throughout its history. But this was different. This was a civilization tearing itself apart. Governor Lucas came to meet Derek as soon as the human delegation landed. Lucas looked like a man who had not slept in days. His eyes were tired, but they had a kind of desperate hope in them. The situation is worse than my message conveyed, Lucas said. They walked through the spaceport toward the military command center. Outside, soldiers were running to new positions. Civilians were running away from the fighting. How much worse? Derek asked. We have supplies for maybe 6 weeks now, Lucas said. After that, the city starts to starve. The 3 major factions are not interested in negotiating. They only want to win. If they cannot win, they want to destroy what others have so no one else can benefit. Derek nodded. He understood the psychology of desperate fighters. When people believe they cannot win through normal means, they sometimes choose destruction instead. What do you need from us first? Derek asked. Protection, Lucas said. My people are afraid. They see the bombardments happening, and they know that the factions do not care about civilian casualties. If you could protect the civilian centers, it would stop the panic. It would give people hope. Derek made a decision. We will send fighter squadrons to patrol over the main population centers. We will also send ground forces to establish neutral zones where civilians can gather safely. But Lucas, you need to understand something. We can protect people, but we cannot fight this war for you. You have to want peace more than you want victory. Lucas understood. He nodded slowly. The human forces moved into position within hours. Captain Paul was a fighter pilot with 15 years of experience. He had flown in combat conditions on Earth. Now he found himself flying over an alien world, protecting people he had never met. His first mission was simple. Patrol the sky above the capital city. Maintain an air superiority presence. Prevent the factions from conducting unopposed bombing runs against the city. What happened during that mission changed everything. Paul was flying with his squadron when they detected a bombing run developing. One faction was preparing to attack a district controlled by another faction. The attack would kill civilians, probably thousands of them. Paul made a decision. He moved his fighters to intercept the bombing run. He did not attack the enemy bombers directly. Instead, he flew in front of them, blocking their flight path, forcing them to turn away. The enemy commander was shocked. Humans were defending the city? Humans were interfering in the conflict? Paul broadcast a message on the open channel. Any bombardment of this city will be opposed. Any attack on civilian centers will be met with armed resistance. This is not negotiable. The bombers turned away. They did not have the resources to fight the human fighters. They reported back to their commanders that the humans were defending the civilian population. That message spread quickly through the three factions. The humans were not taking sides. The humans were protecting everyone equally. And the humans had weapons and technology that made it dangerous to attack civilian areas. It changed the calculation for all three sides over the next 2 weeks. Human forces established safe zones throughout the capital. These were areas protected by armed human soldiers where civilians could gather. The human rules were simple. If you came to a safe zone, you were protected. No weapons were allowed. No factions were allowed. It was neutral ground. Thousands of civilians moved to these zones. People who were tired of the fighting. People who had been displaced by bombardments. Families with children. General Derek watched the numbers grow. His soldiers were struggling to provide food and medical care to so many refugees. But they were doing it. This was the choice Derek had mentioned to President Harold. Humans would spend resources and effort to protect people, even when it was inefficient. Meanwhile, Governor Lucas was using the stability that human protection provided to open negotiations between the factions. It was not easy. The factions still hated each other, but they were willing to talk now, because they could see that the alternative to negotiation was being opposed by humans. And humans were not opponents they could defeat. Captain Paul continued his patrols. Each time he prevented a bombing run, he was reinforcing the message. Humans cared about civilian lives. Humans would act to protect them. Humans were different from the Val d'Ars. One day, Paul received a report about a medical facility that was about to be shelled by one of the factions. The facility had wounded fighters from all three sides inside it. The faction shelling it wanted to eliminate their enemies. They did not care about the doctors or nurses. Paul flew directly to the facility. He landed his fighter on the ground between the building and the faction's artillery. He stood in the open, exposed, a human willing to be killed to protect a building full of people he did not know. The faction's commander ordered him to move. Paul refused. He broadcast his refusal on all channels. He said that any attack on the medical facility would mean killing a human soldier. And humans would respond. The faction did not fire. They could not. They were running low on resources. Losing a fight with the humans was not in their interest. Paul walked into the medical facility and stayed there for 4 hours while his team secured the perimeter. Doctors and nurses came to him and thanked him. Fighters from all three sides came and thanked him. He was protecting them because they were human or intelligent beings or people. It did not matter to him. They needed protection, and he could provide it. That image, a human soldier standing alone against enemy fire to protect a building full of wounded, spread throughout the Valdra's territories. It became a symbol of what humans were and what they valued. 3 weeks after the human delegation arrived, negotiations began in earnest. The three major factions sat down at a table. They were still enemies, but they were sitting down. They were talking instead of fighting. General Derek worked with each faction's military leadership. He did not take sides. He showed each of them how the war was destroying their resources. He showed them data about civilian casualties. He explained to them that the human presence changed the strategic equation. They could not win through military means anymore. "You have 2 choices," Derek said to each faction leader. "You can negotiate and have a chance at power in the new government. Or you can continue fighting and lose everything to a conflict you cannot win. The humans will not let you achieve total victory. The humans will not allow you to destroy civilian populations. So negotiation is your only real option." It was harsh mathematics, but it was true. And all three faction leaders understood it. Within 6 weeks, a ceasefire was in place. Negotiations were ongoing. The bombardments had stopped. The bleeding had slowed. Governor Lucas sat with General Derek in the command center and watched the reports come in. The fighting was over. Not because one side had won, but because the humans had made a different outcome possible. "You have changed us," Lucas said to Derek. "No," Derek said. "We just protected your people while you figured out how to stop fighting. The change you are making is your own choice." But Derek knew it was not that simple. The presence of humans, their values, their willingness to act in ways that other species found illogical, had changed the Valdres' perspective on what was possible. And that change would spread through the Empire like a contagion, like Cash had warned it would. The reconstruction ceremony took place on the surface of the capital world, in the central plaza that had once been the heart of the Valdres Empire. The three faction leaders stood beside each other in public for the first time in months, not as enemies, but as representatives of a new government. The Valdres Council had reconvened in full session. Supreme Elder Cash had returned to the capital. He stood at the center of the assembly, his ancient eyes watching as history unfolded in front of him. Ambassador Victoria approached him as the ceremony was ending. She had been working with the human delegation for the past weeks, helping coordinate the negotiations. "You were right," Victoria said, "about all of it. We should not have broken the accords." Cash looked at her for a long moment. His expression was difficult to read. "I was right that they should not have been awakened," he said. "But I was wrong about the solution. Isolation did not save us. It only delayed the inevitable." General Derek was standing with President Harold, who had traveled from Earth to witness the ceremony in person. They were discussing what came next. The fighting had stopped, but the work of rebuilding was just beginning. What will the Valdres do now? Harold asked Derek. Derek was thinking about the data he had collected over the past months. He had studied the effectiveness of human military operations. He had analyzed the psychological impact of human presence on the Valdres factions. "They will rebuild differently than they did before," Derek said. "We showed them that there are ways to solve problems that do not require total military victory. We showed them that protecting civilians is more important than military advantage. We showed them that cooperation between enemies is possible." "That is what Cash was afraid of," Harold said. "Yes," Derek said. "Not that we would conquer them with force, but that we would conquer them with ideas. That we would infect their culture with the idea that protecting the vulnerable matters more than efficiency." The new government of the Valdres was being formed based on a coalition structure. The three major factions would share power. Human observers would be present to ensure compliance with humanitarian standards. It was not the government the old empire would have chosen. It was less centralized, less efficient, less able to project power. But it was more stable. It was more humane. Supreme Elder Cash called a special session of the full council to address the planet. He did not often speak to the general population. His words carried weight. "We have experienced a transformation," Cash said. His voice was strong, clearer than it had been in months. "We called it a collapse. We called it the end of the empire. But it was something else. It was the beginning of something new." He paused and looked directly at General Derek. "We were warned against awakening humanity," Cash continued. "And the warning was correct. But not for the reasons we believed. We thought humanity would conquer us. We thought they would take our power and our territory. We thought they would replace our dominance with their own." Cash paused again. His ancient eyes seemed to be looking back through centuries of history. "Humanity did not come to conquer," Cash said. "They came to protect. They came to defend people they did not know. They came to risk their own soldiers to save civilians they had never met. This is not conquest. This is something we do not have a word for in our language. This is something that threatens empires built on the principle that might makes right. Because humanity brought a different principle. They brought the principle that right makes right, that protecting the innocent is worth the cost, that cooperation matters more than dominance. He turned to face the human delegation directly. "We feared you," Cash said. "We feared you because in our deepest history, we remembered what it meant to be conquered by an empire. And we built our own empire to make sure we would never be conquered again. But you did not conquer us. You changed us. And that change, that infection of your values into our culture, is what we feared most of all. Not because it would make us weaker, but because it would make us different. And we were afraid of different." The chamber was silent. The weight of Cash's words hung in the air. "I was wrong to oppose the intervention," Cash continued. "Not because we should have welcomed you as allies, but because I should have understood that isolation could not stop what you are. Isolation could only delay it. And in delaying it, we allowed our civilization to destroy itself from within." He turned to the three faction leaders. "You are now the government of this world," Cash said. "You will decide what kind of civilization we become. You will decide whether we keep the values that humans have shown us, or whether we try to return to the old ways. But understand this, the old ways are gone. We have seen another possibility. That possibility will always exist now. It cannot be unseen." The ceremony ended. The crowds dispersed. The work of rebuilding began in earnest over the next months. The new Valdris government began to implement policies that had never existed in their empire before. Laws protecting civilian populations in military conflict. Requirements for humanitarian treatment of prisoners. Resources allocated to helping displaced people and refugees. Each policy was difficult. Each one met resistance from those who believed in the old ways, the old efficiency, the old power structures. But each policy also created a kind of momentum. As people saw their government protecting them, they began to expect it. They began to demand it. The change was becoming permanent. General Derek continued to work with the new government as an advisor. He established training programs for Valdris military personnel based on human doctrine. The key principle he taught was this: the strength of a military comes not from the willingness to destroy, but from the discipline to protect. This was something most Valdris military officers had never learned. Captain Paul was promoted and assigned to establish a permanent human military presence in the Valdris territories. He trained new pilots and soldiers. He worked with Valdris commanders to help them understand how to operate according to the new principles of humanitarian warfare. Dr. Lisa worked with Valdris historians and cultural experts to document what had happened during the collapse and intervention. She interviewed refugees, soldiers, and government officials. She gathered data on how many civilian lives had been saved by human intervention. The numbers were staggering. Over 200,000 civilians would have died if the bombardments had continued. Instead, they were alive. They were rebuilding. They were helping shape the new civilization that was forming several months after the ceasefire was established. President Harold met with the three faction leaders and Supreme Elder Cash in a private session. The discussion was about formalizing the relationship between Earth and the Valdris territories. "We will establish a permanent delegation here," Harold said. "Humans and Valdris working together to ensure stability and humanitarian standards. We will also share technology. We will help you rebuild your infrastructure. But there are conditions." "Conditions?" one of the faction leaders asked. "Yes," Harold said. "The conditions are that you maintain the humanitarian standards we have discussed, that you protect civilians in any future conflicts, that you allow human observers to verify compliance, and most importantly, that you spread these values to the other territories of what remains of the Valdris Empire." The faction leaders agreed. They understood that human support was essential to their survival. They understood that the cost of that support was adopting human values. As Earth expanded its presence in the Valdris territories, other species began to notice. What was humanity doing? Were they conquering? Were they expanding their empire? The answer they received was confusing to many. Humans were doing something that did not fit existing patterns. Humans were helping rebuild an alien civilization according to principles of protecting the innocent and serving the common good. Humans were spreading values, not borders. Humans were changing culture through cooperation and example, not through military force. In the councils of other galactic powers, ancient wisdom was questioned. Perhaps the warnings about humanity had been incomplete. Perhaps human strength was not something to fear because it would lead to their domination. Perhaps it should be feared because it would lead to transformation. Supreme Elder Cash, in the final years of his long life, gave an interview to Dr. Lisa. She asked him what he thought of the situation now, looking back on everything that had happened. "I understood the danger," Cash said, "but I did not understand its nature. I thought humanity was dangerous because they would take power. But humans are dangerous because they refuse to accept that taking power is the only solution to problems. They refuse to accept that hierarchy and efficiency are the highest values. They insist on mercy and protection and cooperation. And these ideas spread like an infection through any society that comes into contact with them. Is that a bad thing?" Dr. Lisa asked. Cash looked out the window at the capital city, being rebuilt with human help, beginning to look different from what it had been. Not worse, not better, just different. "It is neither bad nor good," Cash said. "It is necessary." The Valdris Empire was building something that could not survive contact with reality. We were building an eternal hierarchy in a universe that does not support eternity. Humans came and showed us that another way was possible. Now we have to choose. And I think